Welcome to From the King's Pen. I'm Arthur Diaz, and I'm here to share with you a dose of writing, learning, speaking, and trying to live a little bit better day by day. I want to ask you a question. Have you ever considered how stories are all around us in our lives? How they play such an important role in our lives? If you have never noticed, think about this. How many times have you heard or said the words, "Once upon a time"? Right? The classic beginning to fairy tales. Probably fairy tales that your parents or teachers or someone in your family used to teach you. They used to tell you some moral of the story with that. And that's just the thing. Storytelling is a powerful way to teach and communicate ideas. Stories help us translate concepts into a human perspective. It allows us to humanize them and make them easier to stick into our thick skulls and make us remember. It's a lot easier to remember a fact that comes from a story or comes with a story than just a random fact all alone. A great example of that can be found on the Bible, on the New Testament. Many of Jesus' teachings come from his parables, the stories he tells his disciples to teach them something, like the story of the Good Samaritan, for example. And they are very applicable in our own lives. The storytelling technique is a very powerful way, both when you're writing or speaking, to connect to people, to make them relate to you, understand where you're coming from. Now the question is, how can you use storytelling? It can be actually quite simple. The whole idea of storytelling is to make things simpler, not more complicated. So I want to teach you 4 pillars you can use to create a good, engaging story that will help you connect to your audience, connect to people. Number 1, the first pillar, why? Why are you telling the story? What do you want people to take away from it? Are you trying to entertain them, make them laugh? That's great. That's a very valid reason to tell a story. Just to be funny, just to be relatable. Great for hanging out at parties, for making new friends, for them to understand your worldview. Are you trying to convey a message, teach something? That's great too. The arc of the story can help us demonstrate why a certain lesson was important, or why something happened, or why you should do this or not that. So great. You need to start creating your story or crafting your story from the why. That way, you can have it very clear where you're trying to lead people. Think about it this way. What value are you trying to add to your audience's life? Do you want them to feel entertained? Do you want them to learn something? Do you want them to connect to you? Do you want them to learn something about themselves and reflect about something? It needs to be very clear for you so you can tell a story that is coherent. The second pillar is going to be characters, or at the very least, one character to move the story along. A story needs someone, a protagonist, that is going through something, a journey from point A to point B. That character can be yourself, someone you've met, a friend, someone you've heard about, Buddha, Jesus, anyone. Doesn't matter who the character is, but you need one, at least one. You can obviously have more characters if you want to tell a more complex story. You can have an opponent, an antagonist that's going to be in the way of your protagonist. You can have an enemy, you can have friends in the story. But the fact is, a story needs at least one character your audience can relate to, your audience can follow along in that journey from point A to point B. Then we move to the third pillar, conflict. To be engaging, a story needs to bring some tension into it. There's nothing more boring with a story that's just a series of and then. This happened, and then this happened, and then that happened. That's not storytelling. That's reporting the news and in a very, very poor way. Okay? You need to add conflict. You need to add tension. A good story is going to be like a roller coaster. It's going to have its ups and downs, or at the very least one up and down. You don't need to make the world's most complex roller coaster with loops and so on and so forth. No, just one up and down at the very least will be fine, but you need some conflict. Think about the character Michelle from the first American Pie movie. People who are over 30 will definitely remember. She was portrayed as a boring character, especially because all her stories began with, and then this one time at band camp, right? Her stories were just plain and boring. Don't use "and then." Think about using "but then." Because since this happened, that happened. Try to introduce some distinction. This resulted in that because of the other. There's a very good video by the creators of South Park where they explain how they move through story bits like that. I'll leave a link to that right on the screen so you can check it out if you want. From the conflict, we move to the fourth pillar, right? Which is resolution. Like I said, the story is like a roller coaster. It has to go up in tension, but it also needs to come back down. However, your resolution doesn't need to be a happy resolution. It has to come back to the end, resolve the conflict somehow, but it doesn't have to be good. It can be a lesson learned because the protagonist failed to overcome the conflict. It can be a positive resolution. It can be how they overcame the conflict and the lessons learned. The fact is, the resolution is how your story is going to connect back to your why, to the lesson you want to teach, to the punchline of your joke that you want to have people laugh at, to what makes it relatable so that other people will understand, but it brings the story back down in terms of tension. It's your character who started at point A and faced some obstacle, finally getting somehow to the point B. Whether that point B was the goal of the character or not. Whether it's a happy ending or a not very happy ending. Okay? Now you might be asking, how can I use this in my life? How is that useful to me? Well, this is powerful. Storytelling helps you connect to people. One example is you can use it even in job interviews. You can use storytelling to tell the interviewer about a moment in your life where you overcame your weakness or where a strong point of yours shined. I can give you a personal example. I once got a job in telemarketing, a sales position, by telling a story about how I became the leader of my band, of a rock band. Seems to be completely unconnected, but no. I simply illustrated that I joined the band and there were some issues. We didn't have any gigs, we didn't have songs recorded, we didn't have anything. And then I took the lead and figured out who I had to call, how to book a gig. But then we had issues with that. I had to deal with the promoter trying to screw us, and so on and so forth, until we finally could play a gig and won a battle of the bands. That showed some leadership skills, showed that I was proactive, showed that I could talk to people and get things done. So try to use the storytelling technique to connect to people in your life, to help them relate to you. Remember, it's a lot easier to persuade people to see things your way if they can relate to you. So help them see things your way. Help them see things through your shoes by telling them a story. I hope this has been helpful for you, and as usual, consider liking, sharing, and subscribing. This is it for this time, and I'll see you soon again with more doses of insights from the King's Pen.
Sitting in the highest tower on a castle made of sand, watching the pieces all fall down. I don't own a throne, no, I don't even own a crown. I just sit and I watch it all fall down. Sitting here, it gives me the time to take the time and I'll make the time to be the